What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today we're talking about the Washington football team rounding out the NFC East in our 2021 NFL season preview series. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video, and if you do, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel and want more sports content like this, please consider subscribing. And let me hear your football team, I think that's how you would say it. Let me hear your takes on this team down in the comment section regardless. How many wins do you think this team has? Who are some X factors, some games you're looking forward to watching them play? I love to have your thoughts. I respond to every comment. So let's talk about the Washington football team down below. Jumping right into it, win range 8 to 12 wins. I think this is a really solid team. I know 8 and 9 would, honestly, it'd be a disappointment in my book for how good this roster is. A lot of it comes down to Ryan Fitzpatrick, who obviously we'll talk about later on once we get to the X factors, but this is as good a roster as it gets. It's kind of like in that Denver category where there's not a whole lot of holes around it other than the QB position, but if you were just to, exclude that from how you're analyzing this team, the roster is really solid. Really like Antonio Gibson. Big fan of his game. Had him in fantasy last year too, so that's probably a part of my bias there. But wide receiver room got a lot better this offseason. You signed Curtis Samuel. You draft De'Ami Brown. Logan Thomas gonna, I think, take a step forward this year, another year playing the tight end position. So I really like the offense. The offensive line has some question marks, but Charles Leno, solid at left tackle. The interior is pretty good. And then you draft Sam Cosmi, who has a chance to start at right tackle, and I really liked his game. I know you have to play around with his pass blocking set and some of his technique from Texas, but he tested as a great athlete, and I think the production speaks for itself. So, you add Cosby to that right tackle spot, kind of solidifies what is already a pretty good unit across the offensive line. Then you look at the defense, and I mean, to me, if you saw my defensive rankings, it's the best defense in football. I mean, just to put it lightly, the front four, that pass rush is elite. They just signed Jonathan Allen to an extension, so for the foreseeable future, it's Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen on the inside. Matt Ioannidis rotating in there. Also play some defensive end where you have Chase Young and Montez Sweat. I mean, doesn't get better than that. I mean, that's fantastic. That's 4 first-round picks plus Matt Ioannidis, who for a 27-year-old feels a lot older than that, but he is a plus-level player in the NFL. And the linebacking core isn't necessarily great. I'm a big fan of Jamin Davis, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. I think he'll be a great fit. He was Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera's #1 defensive player on their draft board. Like, think about that. Compare that to J.C. Horn or Micah Parsons or Patrick Surtain or Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Names you typically heard as the top defensive player on a lot of people's draft boards. Like, for me personally, it was Micah Parsons and then Patrick Surtain right there for that best defensive position player in this draft. In the eyes of Ron Rivera, Jack Del Rio, 2 former NFL linebackers, it was Jamin Davis, which I think says a lot for how they evaluate his talent. So he and Cole Holcomb, especially if you're in a nickel package where you only have 2 linebackers out there, that's a solid enough duo, and that's your weak part of the defense because we talked about the front 4, and then you look at the secondary. We're going to talk about Jeremy Reeves in a little bit. Then you have Cameron Curl, who made a big impact last year as a rookie, and you still have Landon Collins, who can play some box linebacker for you pretty much, and you have Kendall Fuller. Jimmy Moreland's not bad as your third corner. Obviously the big signing of William Jackson III. I mean, that secondary is damn good too. So you have that plus the pass rush. The linebacking core is more than good enough. I mean, that defense is legit. So it comes down to, ultimately, can Ryan Fitzpatrick be consistent? Can he can he raise his floor? Because when Fitzpatrick's bad, it's bad. Like, it's 4 picks in a game. It's a completion percentage at or below 50%, and it's just ugly to watch. But then it'll also make some throws that you just don't know how on God's green earth that it was complete. And that's kind of the roller coaster you get with him. Overall, if he can keep those peaks that he's had in his career, but then raise the floor to where his bad games are game manager type of situations, that takes this team into legit NFC contender status for me. Obviously, that's a huge asterisk to lean on, right? To ask Ryan Fitzpatrick to be something other than what he's been in his entire career when he's in his late 30s, not really a reasonable expectation for the guy. But nonetheless, there's a pathway in front of him, and I see this team winning 11 games. I think it's the best team in the division. It comes down to them or Dallas, and I talked about this in my Dallas preview video. The way I see it, Dallas has the elite offense. Washington has the elite defense. What about the other side of the ball? Dallas is going to be bad on defense. Like, even if it gets better, they're going to go from one of the worst defenses in football to 25 to 22, maybe 20-ish range, and yards allowed, points per game. Meanwhile, I think Washington's offense is middle of the pack. I really do like what is around Ryan Fitzpatrick. And over the last 3 years, you could argue that Ryan Fitzpatrick has had his most productive years of his career, obviously in smaller sample size, primarily as a backup fill-in guy. But he's been playing good football as of late when he's been given the task of being the starter or even coming on in, quote-unquote relief for the Dolphins last year. So when it comes down to Dallas's defense versus Washington's offense, I think Washington's offense is better. So I think they're the best team in this division. Also, it comes down to coaching. I'm a big fan of Ron Rivera. Mike McCarthy has won a Super Bowl, and he's got one more than I have, obviously. So I don't want to sound like I know everything in the world, but it's kind of questionable what he's done so far. And there's a lot of people who are saying he's already on the hot seat. And if he has a disappointing year this year, I would buy into that group. I would say he has to be someone who's considered in that category. But we're not talking about the Cowboys. We're talking about the Washington football team. So I've won 11 games. Tell me how many wins you think they get down below. Realistic goal, make the playoffs, right? This is, in my opinion, the best team in the division. So they should be minimum 4 seed like they were last year. And keep in mind that playoff run with Taylor Heineke as the starter, they gave the Bucs the best run other than maybe the first half of that Tampa Bay Packers Green Bay NFC Championship game. But Washington gave them a run for their money with Taylor Heineke. And I mean, that speaks to how good the rest of this roster is. And that really speaks to how, if you have that good of a pass rush, what you can do. No matter what, you will not be out of a game. It's almost like what the Chiefs have with Patrick Mahomes. They can fall behind 21-0 to the Houston Texans in a playoff game, and it doesn't matter because Mahomes is just better than everybody. With that good of a pass rush, the door is almost never closed on you until you're down to, a minute left, you're out of timeouts, those type of situations. So I think this team stays competitive, but again, it comes down to Ryan Fitzpatrick. This defense is good enough to win the games that he plays bad, and they can turn his great games into, blowouts. But he's an X factor, so we'll talk about him in a little bit, even though we've mentioned him a ton already. Reach goal. Reach the NFC Championship game. I think it's possible, right? Like, maybe Green Bay regresses a little bit. Maybe this offseason drama catches up to them. And maybe it's Tampa and Washington in the NFC Championship game. I mean, there's other teams that I think have a pathway there, like San Francisco is probably more likely. But you can't tell me there's a 0% chance that Washington's not there. And, if you get the best out of Fitzpatrick, the rest of that roster puts you in a position to be playing a game away from the Super Bowl. So if you're getting the best of Ryan Fitzpatrick week in and week out, I'd almost argue it's a disappointing season if they don't get to the NFC Championship, given how good that defense is, how good those wide receivers are, how much I like Logan Thomas, and how good of a tight end he's become. Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissick, all those pieces. The offensive line's good. I go on and on. If you're getting good Ryan Fitzpatrick, this team should be. It almost isn't a reach goal at that point. It becomes a reach goal because Ryan Fitzpatrick is so up and down and a bit of a roller coaster, which leads us into our X factors. Let's talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick. We've already talked about him a ton, but see some of his stats from last year. The completion percentage at a good mark, pretty solid QBR. You'd like to see a little bit better touchdown to interception ratio, but league average when it comes to his overall grade per PFF and right around it when it comes to his passing grade. When he's good, he makes throws like he did against the Raiders, and it's like, how? How does Ryan Fitzpatrick, of all dudes, make that play happen? And I don't know. He's just not afraid to make a big play. He is Brett Favre minus an elite arm. Like, he is just not afraid to make a throw, even if there's only a foot of space. And that's where he really gets in trouble, right? Like, you look at Brett Favre, you look at Patrick Mahomes, you look at Josh Allen, you look at maybe Jordan Love becomes something like this too. Dudes who just, want to sling the rock and try to make every throw. But the thing with Favre, Allen, Mahomes, all those guys I just mentioned, they have elite arm strength and they can fit it into tight windows. Fitzpatrick, especially at this point in his career, doesn't really have that same zip on the football. So I think it comes down to what Scott Turner can do to try to make the game simple and create open throws for Fitzpatrick to make, right? Like, if he can scheme open Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin, who's one of the best wide receivers in football. I can't believe I haven't mentioned his name till now. And I love De'Ami Brown. I think he's maybe the best deep threat in this past wide receiver class. Like, pure deep threat, getting open down the field, being explosive, that type of stuff. Obviously, the top three got a lot of love and attention, but De'Ami Brown's right there with him if he's not maybe the best pure deep threat wide receiver of this rookie class. So the pieces are there for Ryan Fitzpatrick. It just comes down to, again, raising the floor while keeping the ceiling. obviously that's a huge asterisk to lean on. So with that said, obviously he's a huge X factor. This team will go as he goes because he plays the most important position in football. And it's a position that, despite having a great roster around you, you could end up winning only, say 6 games. You might be looking at Denver in that type of situation. But if he plays well, just like Denver is relying on Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater, if they play well, that team could be a 11, 12, 13 win football team. So obviously he's got to be an X factor. Jamin Davis, kind of mentioned him a little bit earlier. I loved the progression that he made at the college level week in and week out. He just got better and better. And by the end of the year, he looked like a different football player, honestly. It's kind of reminiscent of Patrick Queen at LSU, where just you could see that young player starting to figure it out. And, Patrick Queen didn't necessarily look great last year with Baltimore, but I think he did what Wink Martindale was asking of him. And I think the circumstances are going to be a little different in Washington. I think Ron Rivera is going to have him in a different spot. You're talking about a 3-4 in Baltimore versus a 4-3 in Washington. The biggest thing for Jamin Davis, and I don't know if he'll have it right away, is being a Mike linebacker and being able to make adjustments to the line of scrimmage. That was something I really loved about Nick Bolton back in that Chiefs video I did. He is going to be able to fill that void, and I think it makes Willie Gay Jr. a lot better. Is Jamin Davis ready to do that? And if not, can Cole Holcomb do it? Or, who is that guy? Who is that Mike linebacker who's, making changes to the line of scrimmage, calling out audibles made by the other team? Can Davis do that? Because if he does, he's a freak athlete. He can play all 3 downs. He'll be a force in the run game. He'll rack up tackles. He'll make plenty behind the line of scrimmage. And because he's good in coverage and a good athlete overall, he'll have some, pass breakups. He'll come away with a pick or two. And, he can lead the boom. So don't be surprised if he has a forced fumble and fumble recovery somewhere in there as well. So I think this is as good a spot he could have found himself, considering he's learning from Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera, as I mentioned, former NFL linebacker. So I really love the landing destination for Jamin Davis. And if he plays well, you can take linebacker off of the weakness list for this team. Because, right now you could say it's a weakness, but I like Cole Holcomb's potential, and I really like Jamin Davis's at that point. And the last X factor, Jeremy Reeves. Why is this a guy nobody talks about? Look at these PFF grades. Top 3rd in run defense grade, elite coverage grade, and then fantastic overall grade. And he went undrafted in 2018. And I think Reeves has an interesting role, partially because he's a true free safety. Almost all of his snaps per PFF came as a deep safety. And then you look at Cameron Curl, who is the replacement to Landon Collins. I already think he's expendable, but certainly next offseason when you can cut him and you'd save money against the cap. I know the cap's going up, but you're always looking to save money as an organization. Cameron Curl, Landon Collins, more than a majority of their snaps, I think it's almost over 60% for both those guys, came in the box. Cameron Curl's younger and he's cheaper, so why would you keep paying Landon Collins, who almost seldomly is never on the field? And I like Landon Collins. He's good when he's playing, but he's almost never playing. And even if he is, Cameron Curl does it as good and he's cheaper, so why would you pay Landon Collins, right? And then that leaves Jeremy Reeves as your true deep free safety. Plays a lot, trying to read the quarterback's eyes, and if he can be a playmaker this year, and if he can live up to these types of coverage grades and even be a top 3rd of the league run defender, it just solidifies that defense. So you look at Jamin Davis and you look at Jeremy Reeves, 2 guys that could just make sure this is the best defense in football. And that's why I put them as X factors. I believe in them, but if they don't play good this year, let's say Jamin Davis gets out to a slow start in his career, Jeremy Reeves takes a step back, then this defense probably still top 10, but it goes from elite to good, pretty good category. But if Reeves is continuing to play well and Jamin Davis steps into a big role and can be productive right away, this team is as good as it gets. Some games to watch. I know this video is starting to get long compared to other videos. So week 4 at Atlanta, I think it's a winnable game. Plus it's fun to see, high-powered offense under Arthur Smith versus, to me, the best defense in football, Washington football team. So obviously looking forward to that matchup. Week 8 at Denver. This is the battle between 2 of the best pass rushers in football. I am sorry for Ryan Fitzpatrick and Drew Lock / Teddy Bridgewater. That's not a game I'd want to be a quarterback in, so that's obviously fun. And plus, if you steal the game in Atlanta and Denver on the road, you'd love to win any game on the road you can, right? That's what every coach is telling their team. We're going to win all the home games, or we're going to try to split or something there about our road games. So obviously winning ones on the road would go a long way. Week 12 against Seattle. This is a primetime game, Monday Night Football, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry I didn't have that on my graphic, but Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll are 14-2 in primetime. So this would be a huge W. It helps you're at home, but if you can take down a Seattle team that I think is, maybe I'm just a little low on them, but I don't know. If they're over-under at 10.5, I'm betting under. I'm a little lower on the Seahawks than most, so I think this is a winnable game, one, because it's at home, and I think the Seahawks are a little overhyped, plus maybe it's the same thing as last year, where Seattle gets out to a crazy hot offensive start, and then kind of peters out down towards the stretch. And this is one of those cases that, let's say they're not doing that. A high-powered Seattle offense versus a Washington defense on prime time that's, elite. You're watching that game. I mean, it goes without saying. You're watching it, one, because it's Monday Night Football and, you're going to watch it. But two, great offense, great defense. It's always entertaining to watch, see which one comes out on top. So that's going to do it for my 2021 Washington football team season preview video. Tell me your thoughts down below on this team in the comments section. How many wins do you think they have? Who are some X factors in your eyes? And what are some games you're looking forward to watch? I respond to every comment, so let's talk about the Washington football team down below. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want more sports content like this, please consider subscribing. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.